She meant to forward a client's flirty text to her friend, but one wrong tap sent it straight to her billionaire boss, and what followed was not just embarrassment, not just fear, but something that would quietly rewrite the direction of her life in ways she never imagined. Clara Hayes had always been careful. Careful with her words, careful with her work, careful with people. In a world that often rewarded loud voices and bold moves, she survived by being observant, disciplined, and just a little invisible. At 24, she had landed a job at one of the most powerful firms in the city, Virex Holdings, a company known for turning small ideas into billion-dollar empires. For Clara, it wasn't just a job. It was her chance to prove that she belonged somewhere bigger than the quiet, struggling life she came from. Her mornings were always the same. Wake up before sunrise, iron her clothes with precision, tie her hair neatly, and rehearse conversations in her mind before speaking them out loud. She didn't believe in luck. She believed in preparation, and that belief had gotten her this far. But that Tuesday afternoon, all her preparation meant nothing. The office was buzzing more than usual. A new client had just been signed, someone influential, wealthy, and known for bringing in massive deals. His name was Victor Langston. People spoke about him in lowered voices, not out of fear, but because of the kind of presence he carried. He was the type of man who didn't ask for attention, yet commanded it anyway. Clara had been assigned to assist with his onboarding process. At first, she was nervous, but also excited. This was her opportunity to stand out, to show her efficiency, her professionalism, her value. And for the first day, everything went smoothly. Victor was polite. Too polite, actually. He complimented her emails, praised her organization skills, and even joked lightly during their calls. It felt harmless at first. She told herself it was just how high-profile clients behaved. But by the second day, something shifted. The compliments lingered longer than necessary. His tone softened in a way that didn't feel professional anymore. Clara noticed it, but she ignored it. She had learned early in her career that sometimes silence was easier than confrontation. Then came the message. She had just stepped away from her desk to grab a quick coffee when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and saw Victor's name. Expecting something related to work, she opened it casually. Her breath caught instantly. "You look stunning in that blue shirt today. Hard to focus on business when you're around. Maybe we should meet somewhere less professional next time." Her stomach dropped. For a second, she just stared at the screen, rereading the message as if it might change. But it didn't. The words stayed there, bold and undeniable. A mix of discomfort and disbelief rushed through her. This wasn't just unprofessional. This was crossing a line. She walked back to her desk slowly, her mind racing. Should she ignore it? Should she respond? Should she report it? Every option felt risky. Her colleague Mira noticed her expression immediately. "Hey, you look like you just saw something terrible." Clara hesitated, then quietly showed her the message. Mira's eyes widened. "That's not okay. You should report him." Clara whispered. "He's a major client. What if it backfires? What if they think I encouraged it somehow?" Mira frowned. "You didn't." "I know, but still." There was a pause. The kind of pause filled with uncertainty. Clara exhaled slowly. "I'll just send it to Emma. She'll know what to do." Emma was her best friend, logical, bold, and never afraid to speak the truth Clara sometimes avoided. If anyone could give her clear advice, it was her. Clara took a screenshot of the message, typed quickly above it, "Can you believe this? What should I do?" And without thinking too much, she hit send. A second later, everything inside her froze. The chat name at the top of the screen wasn't Emma. It was Adrian Cole, her boss, the CEO of Virex Holdings, the billionaire who rarely spoke, rarely smiled, and never, ever tolerated unprofessional behavior. Clara's heart stopped. "No, no, no, no," she whispered under her breath, her fingers trembling as she stared at the screen. 2 blue ticks appeared. Seen. The world around her seemed to blur. The noise of the office faded into the background as panic took over her thoughts. She had just sent a client's inappropriate message, along with her own commentary, to the most powerful man in the company. Her boss. The man who could fire her with a single sentence. Her chest tightened. Her breathing became shallow. She wanted to undo it, delete it, disappear completely. But there was no undo button for this kind of mistake. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Every time someone walked by, she flinched. Every notification made her jump. She avoided looking toward Adrian's office, even though she could feel its presence like a shadow looming over her. He didn't call her. He didn't message her. He didn't react at all, and somehow that silence was worse than any confrontation she could have imagined. By the time evening came, most of the office had emptied out. Clara sat at her desk, staring at her computer screen without actually seeing anything. Her thoughts kept circling back to the same question. What was he thinking? Did he think she was gossiping? Did he think she was unprofessional? Did he think she was part of the problem? Her phone buzzed. She froze. Slowly, hesitantly, she picked it up and looked at the screen. One new message. From Adrian Cole. Her hands shook as she opened it. Miss Hayes. Be in my office tomorrow at 9 a.m. That was it. No explanation. No emotion. Just a command. Her stomach dropped even further. This wasn't going to be a simple conversation. This was judgment. That night, Clara barely slept. Every possible outcome played out in her mind. In some versions, she was fired immediately. In others, she was humiliated in front of her team. In the worst ones, her reputation was damaged beyond repair. Morning came too quickly. She dressed carefully, choosing the most professional outfit she owned. Her reflection in the mirror looked composed, but inside she was anything but calm. When she arrived at the office, everything felt different. The same desks, the same people, the same routine, but now it all felt distant, like she was walking through a place she no longer belonged to. At exactly 9 a.m., she stood in front of Adrian's office door. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure anyone nearby could hear it. She knocked. Come in. His voice responded calm and unreadable. Clara took a deep breath and stepped inside. Adrian Cole stood by the window, his back partially turned, sunlight outlining his tall figure. He didn't rush to speak. He didn't rush to move. He simply existed in that space with a kind of quiet authority that made everything else feel smaller. Good morning, Clara said softly. He turned slowly, his gaze settling on her. Good morning, Miss Hayes. His tone was neutral, too neutral. Sit, he added. She obeyed immediately, sitting on the edge of the chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. For a moment there was only silence, then he spoke. You sent me a message yesterday. Her throat tightened. Yes, sir. It was a mistake. I meant to send it to my friend. He studied her face carefully. And the message itself? It was from a client, she said, her voice slightly shaky. Victor Langston. He's been inappropriate. Adrian's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened. And you didn't report it? I didn't want to cause trouble, she admitted. He's important to the company. There was a pause. A long, heavy pause. Then Adrian took a step closer. And you thought handling it alone was the better option. Clara lowered her gaze. I thought it was the safer one. Another silence followed, but this time it felt different, less cold, more thoughtful. Adrian exhaled slowly. Look at me. She did. No employee in this company should feel uncomfortable because of a client, he said firmly. That includes you. Clara blinked in surprise. I'll handle Mr. Langston, he continued. You won't have to deal with him again. Her mind struggled to process his words. He wasn't angry. He wasn't blaming her. He was protecting her. Sir, you made a mistake, he interrupted, his tone softer now. But not the one you think. She frowned slightly, confused. You trusted silence more than support, he said. That's the mistake. Clara felt something shift inside her. For the first time since yesterday, her fear began to loosen its grip. I understand, she said quietly. Adrian nodded once. Good, you can go. She stood, still processing everything, and walked toward the door. Miss Hayes, he called. She turned. You handled the situation with restraint, he said. That matters. Her heart skipped slightly. Thank you, sir. As she stepped out of his office, the weight on her chest felt lighter. But something else had taken its place. Something unfamiliar. Something unexpected. Because the man she feared had just shown her a side no one talked about. And deep down she had a feeling this was only the beginning. Clara walked back to her desk, but nothing felt the same anymore. The office, which had always felt like a place of pressure and expectations, suddenly felt quieter, almost unfamiliar. People were typing, phones were ringing, printers were humming, yet everything seemed distant, like she was hearing it through water. Her mind kept replaying the conversation in Adrian's office. He wasn't angry. That alone felt impossible. But more than that, he had taken her side without hesitation. No interrogation, no doubt, no blame. Just a clear, firm decision. She sat down slowly, placing her bag beside her chair, her fingers still slightly cold. Mira leaned over almost instantly, her eyes full of curiosity. Well, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost or survived one. Clara let out a quiet breath. He wasn't mad. Mira blinked. Wait, what? He said I should have reported it. That no employee should feel uncomfortable because of a client. Clara paused, still processing it herself. And he's handling it. Mira leaned back, clearly surprised. That's actually impressive. Clara nodded faintly. Yeah, I thought I was going to lose my job. Instead, she felt something else now, something she couldn't quite name. It wasn't relief alone, it was deeper than that. Respect. The day moved forward, but whispers began to spread quietly across the office. Not about Clara, but about Victor Langston. His name started disappearing from conversations. Meetings involving him were suddenly reassigned. Files were moved. His account was no longer under Clara's responsibility. No official announcement was made, but everyone noticed. And Clara understood exactly why. By midday, she received an internal email, short, direct. Client Victor Langston has been removed from active projects. Further communication with him is not required. No explanation. No details. But the message was clear. Clara stared at the screen for a moment, her chest tightening slightly. Not with fear this time, but with something warmer. Someone had acted quickly. Decisively, for her. That realization stayed with her longer than she expected. Later that afternoon, Adrian walked past her desk. It was something he did often, but this time felt different. Clara instinctively straightened her posture, unsure if she should look up or stay focused. Miss Hayes, his voice came calm as always. She looked up immediately. Yes, sir. He paused briefly, meeting her eyes. Good work on the Anderson proposal. It was thorough. Clara blinked, caught off guard. Thank you, sir. He gave a slight nod and continued walking. It was a small interaction, simple, professional. But for Clara, it meant more than it should have. Because this wasn't just acknowledgement. It felt intentional. The next few days passed with a quiet shift in the air. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, but something had changed. Adrian began involving Clara in meetings she normally wouldn't attend. At first, she thought it was a coincidence. Maybe someone else was unavailable. Maybe it was temporary, but it kept happening. During one strategy meeting, she sat quietly at the far end of the table, taking notes as usual. The discussion was intense, filled with strong opinions and sharp arguments. Clara kept her focus on her notebook, not expecting to speak. Then Adrian's voice cut through the conversation. Miss Hayes, what do you think? The room went silent. Every head turned toward her. Her heart skipped. For a split second, she froze. This wasn't part of her routine. She wasn't the one people asked for opinions. She was the one who observed, who documented, who stayed in the background. But Adrian was still looking at her, waiting. Clara swallowed lightly and lifted her gaze. I think the campaign is strong visually, but it lacks emotional connection. A few people exchanged glances. She continued, her voice gaining a little strength. It focuses too much on the product, and not enough on the people who will use it. If we adjust the messaging to reflect real experiences, it might resonate better. There was a pause. Then one of the senior managers nodded slowly. That's actually a good point. Another voice followed. Yes, we've been too focused on features. Clara blinked, surprised by the reaction. Adrian leaned back slightly, his expression calm. But there was something approving in his eyes. Expand on that, he said. And just like that, Clara found herself speaking more. Explaining, contributing, being heard. When the meeting ended, she sat there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. She had spoken, and people had listened. That alone felt unreal. As the days passed, these moments became more frequent. Adrian didn't treat her differently in an obvious way. He didn't give her special attention in front of others, but he created space for her voice. Subtle but deliberate, and Clara noticed. One evening, she stayed late to finish a report. The office had emptied out, leaving behind a quiet calm that she preferred. She worked best when there were fewer distractions, fewer eyes, fewer expectations. She was reviewing a document when she heard footsteps. She looked up. Adrian. He stepped out of his office, adjusting his jacket slightly. You're still here? Yes, sir. Just finishing this report. He glanced at her screen, then back at her face. You've been working late often. Clara hesitated. I like making sure everything is done properly. He studied her for a moment. Properly doesn't mean exhausting yourself. She smiled faintly. I'll keep that in mind. There was a brief pause. You should go home, he said. Work will still be here tomorrow. His tone wasn't commanding. It was considerate. Clara nodded. Yes, sir. She began gathering her things, but as she stood, he spoke again. You handled the situation with the client well. She paused, looking at him. I didn't want to create problems, she said softly. Sometimes addressing a problem is the only way to solve it, he replied. There was no judgment in his voice, just a quiet truth. Clara nodded slowly. I understand. He gave a slight nod in return, then turned to leave. But as he walked away, Clara felt something settle in her chest. It wasn't fear anymore. It wasn't uncertainty. It was something steadier. Trust. The next day brought something unexpected. Clara was called into another meeting, this time smaller, more focused. Only a few senior staff members were present. She assumed she was there to take notes again, so she quietly took her usual seat. Adrian entered last. We're working on a new campaign, he said, getting straight to the point. I want fresh perspectives. His gaze briefly met Clara's before moving on. The discussion began, but it quickly became clear that this wasn't a typical meeting. Ideas were being challenged more openly. Different approaches were being considered. At one point, Adrian turned to Clara again. You mentioned emotional connection earlier. Apply that here. Clara hesitated for a second, then spoke. People don't remember products. They remember how something made them feel. If we build the campaign around real stories, not just statistics, it will stay with them longer. Then Adrian nodded. Exactly. That single word carried weight. Clara felt it. For the first time since joining the company, she didn't feel like she was just trying to prove herself. She felt like she belonged. Later that day, as she returned to her desk, she noticed something small but meaningful. An email from Adrian. Subject campaign notes inside, there was a brief message. Good insight today. Keep developing that perspective. Clara stared at the screen for a moment. It wasn't long. It wasn't elaborate. But it was direct, personal, and it meant more than any formal praise she had received before. She leaned back slightly, exhaling softly. Everything had started with a mistake. A single wrong message. Something that had filled her with fear just days ago. And now it had changed the way she was seen. The way she was treated. The way she saw herself. But what Clara didn't realize yet was that this shift wasn't just professional. It was something deeper. Something quieter. Something that was beginning to grow in the spaces between conversations, in the pauses, in the unspoken understanding, and neither of them had fully noticed it yet. But it was there, waiting. Over the next few days, Clara found herself moving through the office with a different kind of awareness. It wasn't confidence, not fully, but something close to it. A quiet steadiness that hadn't been there before. She still worked hard, still checked everything twice, still arrived early and left late when needed. But now, there was a subtle shift in how she carried herself. People noticed. Not in obvious ways, not with loud comments or dramatic reactions, but in small, meaningful changes. Colleagues who once barely acknowledged her now included her in conversations. Managers who used to overlook her presence began asking for her input. It was as if the moment Adrian had recognized her, others had started seeing her too, but Clara wasn't focused on them. Her thoughts kept drifting back to him. Adrian Cole was not an easy man to understand. He spoke little, observed more, and revealed almost nothing about himself. Yet lately there had been moments, brief, almost unnoticeable moments, where something softer slipped through. A glance that lingered a second longer than necessary, a tone that felt less distant, a pause that seemed to hold meaning. Clara told herself she was imagining it. She had to be, because thinking otherwise would complicate everything. That Friday evening, the office was quieter than usual. Most employees had already left, eager to escape into the weekend. Clara stayed behind, finishing up a report that needed to be submitted first thing Monday morning. The soft hum of her computer filled the space as she reviewed the final details. Her eyes were slightly tired, but her focus remained sharp. Then she heard footsteps again. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. Still working. Clara glanced up. Adrian stood a few steps away, his jacket draped over his arm, his expression calm as always. "Yes, sir. Just finishing this." He walked closer, stopping beside her desk. His gaze briefly scanned her screen, then shifted to her face. "You've been staying late a lot." She gave a small, polite smile. "Just making sure everything is done properly." There was a pause. Then he said something that caught her off guard. "You don't have to prove your worth by exhausting yourself." Clara blinked slightly. The words settled in her mind, heavier than expected. "I know," she said softly. "It's just a habit." Adrian studied her for a moment, as if trying to understand something beyond her words. "Habits can be changed," he said. There was no pressure in his voice, just a quiet statement. Clara nodded slowly. "I'll try." Another brief silence passed, but this one didn't feel uncomfortable. It felt easy. Then Adrian spoke again. "There's a place nearby. Quiet, good food." Clara looked at him, slightly confused. "I usually go there after long weeks," he continued. "You should join me." Her heart skipped. For a moment, she wasn't sure if she had heard him correctly. "Sir?" she asked carefully. He met her gaze directly. "Dinner. To discuss your ideas. Professionally." The last word was added with intention, as if he understood exactly what she might be thinking. Clara hesitated. This wasn't something she had expected. This wasn't part of her carefully controlled routine. This was different. But there was nothing inappropriate in his tone. Nothing unclear. Just a simple invitation. And somehow, it felt safe. She nodded. "Okay." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. Good. The restaurant was small, warm, and softly lit. The kind of place where conversations felt private and time seemed to slow down. Clara sat across from Adrian, still slightly aware of the unusualness of the situation, but gradually relaxing as the minutes passed. They ordered simply. Nothing extravagant, nothing that drew attention. For a while, they spoke about work, campaign strategies, client behavior, market trends. But slowly, the conversation shifted. "You think differently," Adrian said at one point, his tone thoughtful. Clara tilted her head slightly. "Differently how?" "You focus on people before numbers." She smiled faintly. "Numbers matter. But people are the reason those numbers exist." He nodded once, as if confirming something to himself. "Where did that perspective come from?" he asked. Clara hesitated for a second, then answered honestly. "My mother." He waited, silently encouraging her to continue. "She's always believed that understanding people is more important than impressing them," Clara said. "Growing up, we didn't have much, but she always said that if you treat people well, things have a way of working out." Adrian listened carefully. "And do they?" he asked. Clara thought for a moment. "Not always, but I still believe it's worth trying." There was a quiet pause. Then Adrian spoke, his voice lower now. "I used to think the opposite." Clara looked at him. "I believed results mattered more than anything else." He continued. "Efficiency. Control. Precision. And now?" she asked gently. He held her gaze for a moment. "Now I'm starting to think there's more to it." The way he said it made something shift in the air between them. Clara felt it. A subtle change, not dramatic, but real. The conversation continued, flowing more naturally now. They spoke about small things. Preferences, habits, perspectives. For the first time, Clara saw Adrian not just as her boss, Not just as the distant billionaire everyone respected and feared, but as a person. Someone thoughtful. Someone controlled. Someone who carried more beneath the surface than he allowed others to see. At one point, Clara's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. A number she didn't recognize. Her expression tightened slightly. Adrian noticed. "Is everything okay?" he asked. Clara hesitated, then nodded. "It's probably nothing." But when the phone buzzed again, she knew exactly what it was. She opened the message. Her stomach dropped. "Victor Langston. Another message. I've been trying to reach you. Ignoring me won't make this go away. We should talk." Clara's fingers tightened around the phone. She had blocked him. Yet somehow he had found another way. She placed the phone face down on the table. Adrian's gaze remained steady. "It's him, isn't it?" She nodded slowly. A brief silence followed. Then Adrian spoke, his tone firm. "Forward it to HR." Clara looked at him. "I already reported the previous messages." "Then report this one too," he said. "Consistency matters." She hesitated. "I don't want to be seen as someone who brings problems." Adrian's expression sharpened slightly, not in anger, but in clarity. "You're not bringing the problem," he said. "You're addressing it." Clara held his gaze. There was no doubt in his words, no hesitation, just certainty, and somehow that certainty gave her strength. She nodded. "Okay." "Good," he said. The moment passed, but something lingered. A sense of alignment. A shared understanding. When they left the restaurant, the night air was cool and calm. The city lights reflected softly on the streets, creating a quiet, almost peaceful atmosphere. They walked side by side for a while. Not speaking, not needing to. At the corner where Clara usually caught her ride, they stopped. "Thank you," she said softly. "For dinner. For everything." Adrian looked at her, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he said, "You don't have to thank me for doing what's right." Clara smiled faintly. "Not everyone does." There was a pause. Then she added, "I'm glad you did." Something in his gaze shifted again, subtle, but undeniable. Her ride arrived. Clara stepped back slightly. "Good night, sir." "Good night, Clara." It was the first time he had said her name like that. Without distance. Without formality. Just her name. As she got into the car, she glanced back briefly. Adrian was still standing there, watching. Not in a way that felt intrusive, but in a way that felt intentional. Clara looked away quickly, her heart beating a little faster than usual. As the car moved forward, her thoughts drifted. Everything had started with a mistake. A simple, careless moment. But now, things were changing. Not just around her, but within her. And somewhere, deep down, she knew this was no longer just about work. The weekend passed slower than Clara expected. Normally, her days off were quiet, predictable, almost routine. She would clean her small apartment, call her mother, maybe read a little or prepare for the week ahead. But this time, her mind refused to settle. She kept thinking about Friday night, about the dinner, about the way Adrian had spoken to her, not as a boss giving instructions, but as someone genuinely interested in what she had to say. The way he listened. The way he noticed small things most people ignored. And most of all, the way he had said her name. Clara. Simple. Soft, without distance. It replayed in her head more than she liked to admit. She tried to distract herself. She cleaned the kitchen twice. Rearranged her desk. Even opened her laptop to review work notes, something she rarely did on weekends. But nothing worked. Because for the first time since joining the company, her thoughts were no longer just about proving herself. They were about someone else. And that made her uneasy. By Sunday evening, she finally sat down with a cup of tea, staring at her phone. There was a message she hadn't sent yet. The HR follow-up. She had drafted it, attached the new message from Victor, and read it at least 5 times. Her fingers hovered over the send button. Then she remembered Adrian's words. "You're not bringing the problem. You're addressing it." She exhaled slowly and pressed send. Almost immediately, a reply came back. "Thank you for reporting. We are reviewing this with priority." Clara set her phone down, feeling a small sense of relief. Not complete, but enough to quiet the tension in her chest. Monday morning arrived with a different kind of energy. The office felt brighter. Not because anything had changed physically, but because Clara felt different walking into it. There was still a trace of nervousness, but it was no longer overwhelming. It was balanced by something steadier. Confidence. When she reached her desk, she noticed an email waiting. From Adrian. Subject: Board meeting, 9:30 a.m. Be prepared to present your campaign concept. Clara blinked. Her, present to the board. Her heart skipped, but this time it wasn't fear alone. It was something sharper, a challenge. She straightened her posture, opened her laptop, and began preparing immediately. By 9:30 a.m., the boardroom was filled. Senior executives, directors, and a few key stakeholders sat around the large table. Conversations were low but serious. The kind of room where every word carried weight. Clara stood near the screen, her laptop connected, her presentation ready. Her hands were slightly cold, but her mind was focused. Adrian stood beside her. Ready? He asked quietly. She nodded. Ready? He gave a small nod in return. Then start. Clara took a breath and began. At first, her voice was calm but cautious. She explained the foundation of the campaign, the importance of emotional connection. The idea that people don't just buy products, they buy meaning. As she continued, something shifted. Her words became stronger, clearer, more confident. She wasn't just presenting anymore. She was explaining something she believed in. The slides moved smoothly. The ideas connected. The room grew quieter as people listened more closely. When she reached the final point, she paused for a second. When people trust your story, she said, they trust your product. Silence followed. Not empty silence, thinking silence. Then one of the directors leaned forward. That's actually very well put. Another nodded. It's simple but effective. A third added, this could work. Clara felt her heartbeat slow slightly. She glanced at Adrian. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes said enough. Approval. The meeting continued, but Clara stepped back, allowing others to discuss and refine the idea. She remained quiet, but this time it wasn't because she felt small. It was because she had already been heard. When the meeting ended, people began gathering their things. Conversations picked up again, but now there was a different tone. Respect. As the room slowly emptied, Adrian turned to her. Stay. Clara nodded, her heart picking up again. When the last person left, the door closed softly. It was just the two of them. Adrian walked toward the table, placing his hands lightly on the surface. You did well, he said. Clara let out a small breath. Thank you. He studied her for a moment. Better than well. She looked at him, slightly surprised. You communicated clearly, he continued. You held their attention, and you made them think. Clara smiled faintly. I just explained what I believed, and that's exactly why it worked, he said. There was a pause, a different kind of pause. Then Adrian spoke again. The board approved your concept. Clara blinked. Already? They don't waste time when something makes sense, he replied. Her chest filled with something warm, pride. But before she could say anything else, Adrian added something that completely caught her off guard. They also approved your promotion. Clara froze. My what? Assistant marketing manager, he said calmly. Effective next month. For a moment, she couldn't process the words. Are you serious? She asked softly. He gave a small nod. You earned it. Clara felt her eyes sting slightly, but she blinked the feeling away. I don't even know what to say, she admitted. Say yes, he said, his tone carrying a hint of something lighter. She let out a small laugh. Yes. The word felt bigger than it sounded. There was a silence after that, but it wasn't awkward. It was full. Then Adrian said something quieter. That message you sent me. Clara groaned softly, covering her face for a second. Please don't remind me. He almost smiled. It changed things, he continued. She lowered her hands slowly, looking at him. In a good way, I hope. He met her gaze. In a necessary way. Her heart skipped again. What do you mean? She asked. He took a step closer, not too close, but enough to shift the space between them. It made me notice you, he said. Clara's breath caught slightly. Not just your work, he added. You. The room felt quieter, smaller, more focused. And what do you see now? She asked, her voice softer than before. Adrian didn't answer immediately. But when he did, his voice carried something new. Something honest. I see someone who reminds me that control isn't everything. Clara held his gaze. And, she asked gently, he exhaled slowly. And someone I don't want to overlook again. The words settled between them, heavier than anything he had said before. Clara felt it. The shift. The line between professional and personal becoming thinner. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. But something had changed. Completely. Later that afternoon, Clara returned to her desk, but her mind was still in that room. The conversation replayed again and again, each word carrying more meaning than it should. Mira leaned over again, unable to contain her curiosity. Okay, you have to tell me. What happened? Clara hesitated, then said quietly, I got promoted. Mira's eyes widened. What? That's amazing! Clara smiled, but there was something else in her expression, and Mira pressed. Clara paused. There's more, she admitted. Mira leaned closer. I knew it. Clara shook her head slightly, trying to stay grounded. I don't know what it is yet, but deep down she did. Something had started. Something unexpected. Something she hadn't planned for. And something she wasn't sure she could stop. That evening, Clara stayed at her desk longer than necessary, not because she had work left to finish, but because her thoughts refused to settle. The promotion still felt unreal, like something that belonged to someone else. Just weeks ago, she had been quietly trying to prove she deserved her position. Now, she was being trusted with something bigger. But the promotion wasn't the only thing on her mind. It was the way Adrian had looked at her. The way his voice had changed. The words he chose, and the ones he didn't. She tried to focus on her screen, but her attention drifted again and again. Finally, she shut her laptop. Enough. She needed air. The city outside was calm, the evening light fading into soft gold and grey. Clara walked slowly toward the bus stop, her thoughts still tangled. She didn't notice Adrian at first. He was standing a few steps ahead, hands in his pockets, looking out at the street as if lost in his own thoughts. When he turned slightly and saw her, something in his expression shifted. Not surprise. Not exactly. More like recognition. You're still here, he said. So are you, she replied, a faint smile forming despite herself. There was a brief pause. Waiting for your ride? He asked. She nodded. Yes, he glanced down the road, then back at her. I can drive you. Clara hesitated. It was a simple offer. Polite, logical. But it carried weight. You don't have to, she said. I know, he replied. Another pause. Clara studied his face for a moment, searching for any sign of pressure or expectation. There was none. Just the same calm steadiness she had come to recognize. Okay, she said softly. The drive was quiet at first. Not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. The city lights reflected against the windows, creating a soft glow inside the car. Clara sat carefully, her hands resting in her lap, unsure if she should speak or let the silence stay. Adrian broke it first. You handled today well. She glanced at him. I was nervous. You didn't show it. I felt it, she admitted. He gave a small nod. That's normal. There was something reassuring in the way he said it. Not dismissive, not distant, just understanding. Clara relaxed slightly. Do you ever get nervous? She asked before she could stop herself. The question hung in the air. Adrian didn't answer immediately. Then he said, Not often. She smiled faintly. That sounds about right. But I used to, he added. She looked at him, surprised. When? She asked. When I didn't know what I was building, he said. Or who I could trust. Clara considered that. And now? Now I'm more careful about people, he said. But less afraid of outcomes. She nodded slowly. That makes sense. The conversation paused again, but this time it felt more natural. Comfortable. As they reached her street, Adrian slowed the car. This is fine, Clara said, pointing ahead. He pulled over smoothly. For a moment, neither of them moved. Clara turned slightly toward him. Thank you for the ride. You're welcome. She reached for the door handle, then paused. Adrian, she said quietly. It was the first time she had said his name like that. Without hesitation, without formality. He looked at her. Yes. She hesitated, then spoke honestly. Today meant a lot. His expression softened just slightly. It was your work, he said. You earned it. Still, she replied. Thank you. There was a brief silence. Then he said something unexpected. Claro, if anything feels too fast, you can tell me. She blinked. What do you mean? This, he said simply. The attention, the change. Us. The word hung there, unspoken before, now undeniable. Clara felt her heart beat a little faster. I don't feel uncomfortable, she said carefully. He held her gaze. Good. Another pause. Then she added, softer this time, I just don't want to lose what we have professionally. You won't, he said immediately. That doesn't change. His certainty settled something inside her. She nodded. Okay. Neither of them moved again for a moment. Then Clara opened the door and stepped out. Good night, Adrian. Good night, Clara. As she walked toward her building, she could feel his gaze for a second longer. Not heavy, not intrusive. Just there. Inside her apartment, Clara leaned back against the door after closing it, exhaling slowly. Everything was changing. Faster than she expected. But not in a way that felt wrong. Just unfamiliar. The next few days brought a new rhythm. Clara stepped into her new responsibilities with focus and determination. Meetings became more frequent. Decisions carried more weight. People looked to her for direction now, not just support. And through it all, Adrian remained consistent. Professional, respectful, but present. He didn't overstep. He didn't blur boundaries in obvious ways. Yet there were moments, small ones, a glance across the room. A quiet check-in after a long meeting. A brief conversation that lasted a second longer than necessary. Each one subtle, each one meaningful. Clara noticed, and slowly, she stopped trying to ignore it. One afternoon, as she was reviewing campaign data, her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Her chest tightened slightly. She opened the message. Her breath caught. Victor Langston. Again. You think reporting me will fix this? You don't know who you're dealing with. Clara's fingers went cold. For a moment, the old fear returned. Sharp. Unwelcome. But this time something was different. She didn't freeze. She didn't hesitate. She took a screenshot, opened her email, forwarded it to HR, copied Adrian. No second thoughts, no doubt. She hit send. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed again. Not Victor. Adrian, received. This will be handled. Short, direct, certain. Clara exhaled slowly, the tension easing from her shoulders. She looked up from her desk, her eyes instinctively finding his office. The door was slightly open. For a second, she saw him inside, focused, composed, already taking action. And in that moment, she realized something clearly. She wasn't alone in this anymore. Not at work, not in this situation, and maybe not in more ways than one. That evening, as she prepared to leave, Clara, she turned. Yes. Have you had dinner? The question surprised her. Not yet, she said. He nodded once. Then come with me. No explanation. No formality. Just a simple statement. Clara hesitated for a second. Then she smiled faintly. Okay. This time the decision felt easier, not because things were clearer, but because she trusted the uncertainty, and maybe that was the biggest change of all. They didn't go to the same place as before. This time Adrian chose somewhere quieter, more private, tucked away from the noise of the city. The kind of place people didn't accidentally walk into. Soft lighting, low music, and just enough distance between tables to make every conversation feel like it belonged only to the people having it. Clara noticed the difference immediately. This place is different, she said as they sat down. Adrian gave a slight nod. Less crowded, easier to think. She smiled faintly. Or talk. He didn't respond right away, but there was a hint of agreement in his expression. They ordered something simple again. It was becoming a quiet pattern between them. No unnecessary display. No excess. Just presence. For a few minutes they spoke about work. It felt natural, like an extension of their usual conversations. Campaign progress, deadlines, expectations. But as the conversation continued, it shifted slowly, almost without them realizing it. You handled the message today quickly, Adrian said. Clara looked at him. I remembered what you said. And I decided not to overthink it, she replied. Just act. He nodded slightly. Good. There was approval in his tone, but also something else. Respect. Clara leaned back slightly, studying him for a moment. You don't seem surprised. I'm not, he said. Why? Because you learn fast, he replied. The simplicity of the answer made her pause. Not everyone notices that, she said quietly. I do, he said. The way he said it made her look away for a second, her thoughts shifting again. The food arrived, giving them a moment to reset. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the kind that didn't demand to be filled. Then Clara spoke again. Can I ask you something? Adrian glanced at her. You usually do. She smiled slightly. Why me? He didn't pretend to misunderstand. You could have given that presentation to anyone, she continued. There are people more experienced, more established. Adrian set his fork down, considering the question. Experience doesn't always mean clarity, he said. And I have clarity, she asked. You do, he replied without hesitation. Clara held his gaze. And that's enough, she asked softly. For me, yes. The answer was steady. Certain, it settled something inside her again, but it also raised something new. A question she hadn't fully allowed herself to think about. Is that the only reason? She asked, her voice quieter now. Adrian didn't respond immediately. He really looked at her, as if weighing whether to answer honestly or keep things simple. Then he said, No. Clara's breath caught slightly. The space between them shifted again. How many reasons are there? She asked, trying to keep her tone light. But there was something deeper beneath it. Adrian leaned back slightly, his expression calm but more open than before. Enough to make me notice you before that message, he said. Clara blinked. You noticed me before? She asked. Yes. Then why didn't you say anything? Because I don't act on impulse, he replied. She tilted her head slightly. And now? Now I'm choosing to, he said. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Clara felt it. The shift from possibility to intention. She looked down for a moment, her fingers lightly touching the edge of her glass. This isn't complicated for you, is it? She asked quietly. It could be, he admitted. But I prefer clarity. And what's clear to you? She asked. Adrian leaned forward slightly, his voice lower now. That I respect you, he said. That I trust your judgment. And that I'm interested in knowing you beyond this office. Clara's heart beat faster. There it was. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just honest. She looked up at him again. And if I said I'm still figuring things out? She asked. Then I'd give you time, he said. No hesitation, no pressure. Just patience. Clara let out a slow breath, feeling both grounded and uncertain at the same time. That helps, she said softly. The conversation eased after that, shifting back to lighter topics. Small stories, shared observations, moments that felt normal despite everything that had changed between them. But the tension didn't disappear. It just became quieter. More controlled. More real. When they left the restaurant, the night felt cooler than before. The air carried a calm that matched the pace of their steps as they walked side by side. This time, there was no question about how she would get home. They walked to his car together. As they reached it, Clara paused. Adrian. He looked at her. Yes. She hesitated for a second, then spoke honestly. I don't want this to feel like something I didn't earn. His expression shifted slightly. What do you mean? The promotion. The opportunities. The attention, she said. I don't want people to think. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Adrian understood. They won't, he said firmly. You don't know that, she replied. I do, he said. Because your work speaks for itself. Clara held his gaze. And what about us? She asked quietly. He didn't look away. We're not hiding anything, he said. We're just not rushing it. The answer was careful, measured, and somehow that made it more reassuring. Clara nodded slowly. Okay. He opened the car door for her. She got in without hesitation this time. The drive felt different, not quieter, just more settled. As if something had been acknowledged, even if not fully defined. When they reached her building again, she didn't rush to leave. She turned toward him. Thank you, she said. For what? For being clear, she replied. He gave a slight nod. Clarity avoids confusion, he said. She smiled faintly. I'm starting to see that. There was a brief pause. Then Clara opened the door. Good night, Adrian. Good night, Clara. She stepped out, closing the door gently behind her. But before she walked away, she turned back for a second. He was still there, watching. Not with intensity. Not with expectation, just with quiet attention. Clara felt her heart shift again, just slightly. Then she turned and walked toward her building. Inside, she leaned back against the door once more, her thoughts moving faster than she could organize them. Everything felt real now. Not uncertain. Not imagined. Real. And that made it both easier and harder. Because now there was no pretending nothing was happening. There was something. Something growing. Something steady. Something that didn't need to be rushed to be understood. Clara closed her eyes for a moment, letting the silence settle around her. Tomorrow would come. Work would continue. Responsibilities would grow. But now, there was something else woven into all of it. Something she hadn't planned. Something she hadn't expected. And something she was no longer afraid to face. The next morning, Clara arrived at Virex Holdings before most of the staff. The office was quiet, washed in pale sunlight, with only the soft hum of machines and the distant sound of cleaners finishing their rounds. She placed her bag beside her desk, opened her laptop, and stared at the screen for a moment before typing anything. There was work to do. A lot of it. But her mind wasn't fully on the campaign anymore. It was on the way Adrian had said he wanted to know her beyond the office. It was on the calm certainty in his voice. It was on the strange comfort of being seen without being pressured. Still, Clara knew one thing clearly. If anything between them was going to become real, she had to stand on her own first, not as the assistant who accidentally sent a message, not as the employee he protected, not as the woman a billionaire noticed, as Clara Hayes, the woman who earned her place. So she worked harder that morning, but not out of fear. This time, it came from purpose. She reviewed the campaign, refined the presentation, corrected weak lines, and prepared every detail for the client pitch. By 9, the office had filled with voices and movement. Mira stopped by her desk with 2 coffees and a knowing look. You look serious today, Mira said. Clara accepted the cup. I feel serious. About work or about him? Clara looked up quickly. Myra, what? I'm just asking. Clara lowered her voice. It's not simple. Mira's teasing faded into something gentler. Then make sure you don't disappear inside his shadow. You're too good for that. Clara paused. That was exactly what she had been thinking. I won't, she said quietly. And she meant it. The campaign pitch began at 11. The room was full again, but this time Clara didn't feel like a guest in someone else's space. She stood beside the screen with steady hands and clear eyes. Adrian sat at the end of the table, watching silently. The clients were sharp, impatient, and difficult to impress. They interrupted twice. Questioned the numbers. Challenged the emotional angle. A month ago, Clara might have folded under that pressure. Today, she didn't. She answered calmly. She adjusted her explanations. She turned every doubt into a reason to listen. Then came the final question. One of the clients leaned back and said, This sounds beautiful, Miss Hayes, but beauty doesn't always sell. Clara smiled, not nervously, but with confidence. You're right, she said. Beauty alone doesn't sell. Trust does, and people trust what feels honest. That is what this campaign gives them. The room went quiet. The client looked at the others, then nodded slowly. That, he said, is the line we needed. By the end of the meeting, the deal was approved. A real win, not Adrian's win. Not the company's win alone, hers. When everyone left, Clara remained in the boardroom, collecting her notes. Adrian stayed behind too, but he didn't speak immediately. You're quiet. I'm impressed. She smiled softly. You say that like you didn't expect it. I expected you to do well, he said. You did more than that. Clara lowered her eyes for a second, then looked back at him. I needed to know I could. And now I know. Something warm passed across his face, almost like pride, but deeper. Good, he said. For a moment, the room held them in silence. Then Clara spoke first. Adrian, I need to say something. His expression became serious. Go ahead, I care about you, she said, her voice steady even though her heart was beating fast. But I also care about who I'm becoming. I can't be a story people tell as if you chose me and that made me valuable. Adrian listened without interrupting. I need my work to stand on its own, she continued. I need people to know I earned this. And I need you to respect that, even if it means we move slowly. Adrian stepped closer but stopped at a respectful distance. I don't want you in my shadow, Clara, he said. I want you beside me. Only if you choose to be there. Her breath softened. And if I do choose it, then we build it carefully, he said. Honestly, without taking anything from what you've earned. Clara searched his face. There was no performance there, no arrogance, no control, just patience. For the first time, she let herself believe him fully. A week later, HR closed the investigation against Victor Langston. His contract was permanently terminated, and a formal notice was sent through legal channels warning him to stop all contact with Clara. The message was clear enough that Victor finally disappeared from her phone, her inbox, and her life. When Clara read the final email, she didn't feel victory exactly. She felt free. That evening, Adrian found her standing near the office windows, watching the city below. The lights were beginning to glow, one by one, like small promises. It's done, she said without turning. I know. She looked at him then. Thank you. He shook his head slightly. You did the hardest part. You spoke. Clara smiled faintly, only because someone finally made it feel safe. Adrian's gaze softened. Outside, the city moved beneath them, busy and bright, unaware of how much had changed inside that quiet office. Months passed, and Clara became exactly what she had hoped to be. Stronger, sharper, more certain. Her campaign became one of the company's most successful launches that year. Her ideas were requested in meetings now, not as a favor, but because people trusted her judgment. And Adrian changed too. Slowly, visibly, he laughed more, listened longer, stopped hiding every human part of himself behind silence and discipline. People noticed the warmth in him before they understood where it came from. Clara never announced anything. Neither did Adrian. They simply built something real outside the noise. Some evenings, they had dinner after work. Some weekends, they walked through quiet streets with coffee in hand. Sometimes they talked about business, sometimes about childhood, fear, ambition, and the strange ways life redirects people. And sometimes they said nothing at all, because silence between them had become comfortable. One evening, months after the message that started everything, Adrian took Clara back to the first small restaurant where they had shared dinner. The same soft lights glowed above them. The same corner table was empty, as if waiting. Clara smiled when she noticed it. You planned this? I did. They sat down, and for a while, everything felt beautifully familiar. After dinner, Adrian reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Clara looked at it curiously. What's that? He unfolded it carefully and placed it on the table. It was an old printed copy of her first campaign sketch, the one with her notes about trust, people, and promise. Clara stared at it, surprised. You kept this? Yes. Why? Because it reminded me of the first time I understood how you see the world. Her eyes softened. Adrian continued. You find meaning where others see routine. You find courage even when you're afraid. And you make people want to become better without forcing them to change. Clara looked down, emotion rising in her throat. Adrian. He reached across the table, palm open, not grabbing, just offering. She placed her hand in his. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, he said, but I know I want you in it. Not because of one mistake. Not because of one message. Because every day after it showed me who you are. Clara's eyes glistened, but she smiled. You really know how to turn an accident into a speech. He smiled too. Only for you. She held his hand a little tighter. I want tomorrow too, she said. Outside, rain began to fall lightly, tapping against the windows like a soft memory. Clara looked out and remembered the fear she had felt that first day. The way her hands shook, the way she believed one mistake would ruin everything. But life had not ruined her. It had redirected her. The wrong message had reached the right person. The moment she thought would expose her weakness had revealed her courage. The mistake she wished she could undo had opened a door she never knew existed. And maybe that was the truth she would carry forever. Sometimes life does not begin with perfect timing. Sometimes it begins with panic, embarrassment, and a single wrong tap. Sometimes the thing you fear most becomes the bridge to the life you deserve. Clara had once been the girl who smiled through stress, hoping not to be noticed. Now she was a woman who stood in her own light. And beside her stood a man who had learned that power meant nothing without kindness, and success meant little without someone worth sharing it with. The next morning, when Clara walked into Virex Holdings, she did not walk in quietly hoping to survive the day. She walked in with purpose. Mira looked up from her desk and grinned. "You look happy." Clara smiled. "I am." From across the office, Adrian stepped out of the elevator. Their eyes met for one brief second. No grand gesture, no dramatic moment. Just a look filled with everything they had built carefully, patiently, honestly. Then Clara turned back to her desk, opened her laptop, and began her work. Because love had not saved her from becoming herself. It had simply met her on the way. And all of it, every fear, every tear, every heartbeat, had started with one message she never meant to send.